Well, the plan was that Helene would do this subject, but since she's not responding, I'll pick up here.
I'm back. Sorry. I was stuck on the phone, but I'm back.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, the next topic at the agenda is the publication tool. So I think Gertian, you will present us the status and the pending development.
Yeah, indeed, shortly, and I hope that in the meantime, Syed is also there for any additional questions. But indeed, a publication tool has been available as of December or November, actually, when we start publishing these results. And the tool has been updated, and the publication handbook, of course, as already mentioned before, gives a good idea on what is available and what it entails. There will be further additions, so that's also was still mentioned, what is not yet available. So on the pre-coupling, this is allocation constraints and remedial actions. And for the post-coupling, so the information after market coupling, there still a big part has to be developed. But this is also in principle not scope of the external parallel run. The external parallel run is really focused, of course, on the pre-coupling flows and not the post-coupling ones. Olivier.
Yes, one question on the publication tool. For us, it seems to be very.
Olivier, we cannot hear you very well.
Is it better now?
Yes, much better.
Ah, cool. So for us, we cannot when we download the domains from the publication tool, it is very slow to be downloaded, and I'm wondering whether there are some plan to make the servers on the publication tool side faster, or will that stay the same until the end of the parallel run, and eventually also until after go live?
Hello, this is Syed speaking from JAL. I will try to answer your question here. Olivier, could I ask if you're downloading the data via the website directly or through the API?
Yeah, the API.
Okay. Yes, we have actually noticed that there is a bit of a delay or lag in download just due to the size of the files, specifically the domain files.
Yeah.
And we will try to optimize this. We will introduce an option for you to filter specific hours to maybe reduce the size of the data, so you could maybe retrieve just the hours or days you would need. But at the moment, yes, you would download the full day, and that would actually take some time. We are planning to optimize this. It's something we are aware of, but we're working on, and we plan to have in place soon.
Okay. Yeah, that's great news. And I think there was a question that was to be answered in the document you sent. So the question was, is it possible to publish an IT description of the? No, I think that was something else. So basically, not all the dates are available on the parallel run, because not all the data are computed. And but we saw that in the interface there is some kind of a calendar, and the business date that has been computed are in green, and the one that haven't been computed are in gray. And it would be useful for us to be able, from an IT perspective, to know what dates are computed, so that we don't don't try somehow to brute force and download all the dates, even if the dates are not there. So yeah, I was wondering if it was possible to
Indeed, you're correct.
some kind of a status of the availability of the data, an endpoint for that.
Yes, so at the moment, yes, you're not able to check via the API which days are available to download. And this is something that we, from our side, did not envision or plan to have in place. But of course, this is something I would understand to be very helpful to the market to allow them to exactly understand which days are available to retrieve them. I will check and try to include this and update it. I don't think it'll be a big effort. So this is something we can also push out and have available for you.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would be useful.
Just to be clear, it would be useful then for the period during the external parallel run, maybe. And
Only.
Yeah, that's correct. But even operationally, because timing can change, it can be instead of trying to get tomorrow until it's there, it's eventually better from an IT perspective to have some kind of a signal to say, hey, data are there, and okay, now you can download.
Yeah. Any further questions?
I do not see anything in the chat. Anyone with a question?
Maybe one question. If we're not coming back to the parallel run, I would have. I think the question was more or less answered, but maybe I left some development on that. It's regarding the addition of CNEX that are not part of the core region, mainly in Switzerland, Italy, and in Serbia, I think. Given the fact that those regions are now surrounded by core TSOs, and that flows between two core hubs could lead to loop flows on those non-core region. It was said that it is completely out of the scope to add connects that are not part of core. So will that be the case forever? I know that the Swiss already in the case of CWE have been complaining a lot about those loop flows, and there was eventually planned to include their CVs at some point, their connects, sorry. So that's you confirm that it's still completely out of the scope to add non-core connects in the calculations.
And just to be clear, Olivier, this was is not similar to the question that was also shared by Alain and the answers provided.
Yeah, but it is. It's just that it is said that as soon as it is not relevant for core, it should not be there. But is it really not relevant to have those connects in the calculation?
Yeah, I think, and that's also provided in the answer. So core TSOs are allowed to include connects, also from our own connects, you can say, according to CCM, if they are needed to be included for core TSOs. So they must be fully or partly located. So it's not that there is a connect only situated in another non-core country that can be taken into account, but it can be taken into account as soon as linked to core, if the influence is big enough to be relevant for core, because that's the main philosophy. You're not limiting capacities if not needed.
Okay.
Is it responding your question, Olivier?
Yeah, I think so. So what I understand is that there will never be any connects inside Switzerland or Italy or Serbia, limiting the core flow-based domain.
Not in the current regulatory framework, indeed. You say never, and that's always, I don't know, I'm not a fortune teller, of course. I don't know what the future will bring, but according to the current regulations, indeed.
It's not foreseen.
No.
Okay, I think we can move on.
The next subject then, Helen, or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, then let's go to the...
So it's the presentation. Yes. So yeah, I will quickly introduce the topic. So the Austrian Association Österreich Energy contacted us following a study that they have conducted on the transparency in current flow-based market coupling. And we thought it was a good idea to have a short overview of this presentation and then a short discussion between us on takeaways and possible way forward. So I think the best would be that I give the floor to Alexandra for the slides, and then we will have a discussion on this following the presentation.
Thank you, Hélène. Let me just say a few words on what we wanted to achieve with this study together with the Austrian Energy Agency. Recent developments, as you know all, the split of the former German-Austrian bidding zone and the integration of this border and the flow-based market coupling. So we had the wish or the need just to deepen the knowledge of the whole system, and also to learn where and how to get information, especially for traders, in an easy way. So that's actually the main issue of today's presentation, the usability of already available information. And now I want to pass the word to Karina Knaus. Fortunately, she, as one of the authors of this study, will present the key findings to us and also explain the suggestions. Thank you, Hélène.
Thank you very much, Hélène Alexandra, for the introduction. Just a quick admin question. Is it okay if I share my screen with the presentation, because the slide deck has a slightly abbreviated version? I would still remain for my time slot. Is that okay?
For me, it's okay. I just hope that it works, but should be fine.
Okay, I will give it a try.
Give it a try, and then when you are finished, we'll switch back to the normal slide deck. Let's see.
Okay. Can you see my presentation now? Yes. My slide? Yes, perfect. Okay.
Yes.
So yes, thanks very much for the opportunity to present the results of our study on transparency in flow-based market coupling. One word on the Austrian Energy Agency. We are a research organization doing a national and international projects and national projects in energy, based in Vienna, as you can see in my background. So we're not a market participant, basically, or involved in the sort of day-to-day market trading. My name is Karina, and I head the Center for Economy, Consumers and Prices. So just as a word to begin, we know that there is a long-standing discussion, basically ever since flow-based market coupling began, on publication, what can be published. But let me be clear, the study did not aim to restart it. Our focus is very much on usability. So what does it mean? Well, what we found out, and I'm sort of giving away a little bit the conclusion, is that it's not just, or not so much only on the what. So what is there, what information, what data, but it is also very much about the how. So how is that data, how is that information provided? I think in this forum, I don't need to explain that things involving flow-based market coupling are complex and developed over time. So let me proceed by trying to argue and define how we approach transparency in this project. Transparency is crucial for three aspects. One, of course, is market trust. So only if market participants can understand the processes and results will market trust ensue. Transparency is also very important for competition, so as to create a level playing field between small, large, new, and established market participants. We think that this is particularly important, of course, in light now of the core enlargement. And what do we mean by transparency? Well, on the one hand, we have information transfer, so that's documents and data are available and findable. And we see that a lot of discussion and room is given on this, and that is very important, and that is very good, and we see all the progress. But I also want to draw your attention to two more aspects, and one is usability, so that there are access and usage concepts for all the relevant target groups. And we have a knowledge transfer and interaction, so as there is, feedback culture, appropriate communication channels, appropriate visualizations, for example. What we do not mean by transparency is pseudo-transparency. So, that you basically, in the worst case, you have a lot of data and information, but the usability is so low that, you can't really use that information. So that is what we mean by transparency and why we think it is so important. How did we approach our project? We looked at the processes. That was important for our project, of course. I won't focus on it here. We looked at the challenges in the area of transparency, and of course, we tried to provide solutions. And one of that solution is also related to KPIs, which I think there has been discussion today and ongoing. So I think we will fit in to that discussion. And the methodology used, well, we have the outsider's view that was provided by the Austrian Energy Agency. So we just looked at it basically with our research mind and said, let's see what we can find out. But then we also involved the trader's view by doing questionnaires and interactive workshops. Of course, the traders we interviewed, we talked to, were from Austria, so they're not representative for everybody. But I think they are a very good subsample in the sense that they are comparatively small market participants. And as Alexandra said, in a way, they were also new to this whole market coupling process, in a sense, with the biddings on board, things changed in a short amount of time. So we do think this is a good sort of look in terms of, again, the core enlargement of what we're trying to do now. So in terms of the processes, that was important for a project to create a common understanding. But I want to draw your attention to one conclusion that actually came out of this, trying to create a common understanding of the FOBIS market coupling processes, namely that we found it was actually very, very beneficial and very fruitful to use visualizations such as the flowchart that you see there. It's not about reading it right now. It's in the report if you're interested. But basically what we found is, as a tool, in terms of knowledge transfer and usability, creating flowcharts is very useful and can sometimes get information across way easier in a way than writing 100-page documentation. So that already went into our conclusions. In terms of the problems we found, or the barriers, I should say, we divided them into two categories, one in terms of document management, one in terms of data. And the challenge we encountered really from an outsider's point of view that finding all relevant and currently applicable documents from all sources is actually very hard. So we have a variety of platforms, of course, some subsites. We know there are legal and historic reasons for that. But that makes it very hard. The lack of sort of search and filter and overview functionality on the platform is very difficult. Once you found a document, and then sometimes it's difficult to actually find it again because you can't really search for it. the naming conventions and the structure and versioning are very difficult to sort of, or make it difficult to follow what is going on. You know, in terms of, for example, there is no archive, so you don't really know which documents are still applicable and which are not. You typically have the same or the upload date as a filter on the Java platform, so it is very difficult to know was that just the upload date or is that actually the date that is relevant for the document, and so on. So overall, we concluded that yes, gathering information on this topic and particularly also tracking any updates and changes is hard and does incur substantial search and transaction costs. Because I didn't mention it, even though it's in my notes, I should mention that we concluded the study in summer last year. So, you know, some of the conclusions or detailed points in the study might no longer be applicable, but I think in terms of, and of course, huge progress has been made, but in terms of the usability, I think our points remain valid. In terms of data provision, the challenge is obviously to find the data in a timely manner and sufficient quality. We found that the data format and interface are, you know, not good practice in the sort of scientific state of the art world. I think this has somehow changed now because we have the new utility tool and no longer the Excel tool. The performance issues, we found them in the past. They were mentioned now, but we didn't do an analysis on this new tool. And we also found issues with communication of updates, especially if you don't have the capacity to look at things on a sort of regular day-to-day, you know, basis. And there are large amounts of data without analysis, graphical representation, so that again just makes it hard to follow. But let me also say that, you know, we characterize these by sort of soft barriers. So we know a lot of information is there, a lot of data is there, if you sort of know how to find and get it. But these soft barriers, we think, in particular for smaller market participants or new market participants, they are an issue because then you need sort of very big resources to gather all this information that is necessary, and that makes it hard for, in particular, those market players. In terms of solutions, of course, we try to offer solutions as good as we can, and some of those are actually quick wins, we think, so they would be fairly easy to do. Some, of course, are large gains and maybe more difficult to implement. So one thing, I'm not going to go through my entire list because I also have some examples, but would be, for example, a standardized document structures with authors and contacts, so you know who to ask if you do have a question. File formats, data that is machine readable, or, for example, attachments mentioned in the main documents should be findable again and ideally cross-referenced with digital object identifiers so that they have a fixed place, basically, and you don't go through very long, hundreds of pages of long documents where attachments are mentioned, and then you just, if you, as I said, don't have the capacity to deal with the topic every day, all the time, then it becomes very hard to actually find those things. Or, for example, naming convention, file names that are consistent and intelligible, because then when you download a document package, then you can actually, you know, filter and sort it way more easily on your own client rather than having, I don't know, core always spelled differently, and then it makes it very hard to actually retrace the documents. And that's sort of happened multiple times that we found documents and then we weren't sure if they were still valid. We couldn't find them again. And that just means it makes it very, very hard. With regard to the data, the aim in terms of usability would be to have a low threshold comprehensible access. to all the necessary data set. Some of the recommendations we made are in terms of, again, having sources and contacts, so you know where the data sets come from and who to contact. An up-to-date documentation. We had some trouble with this in the old utility tool. I think now it is more integrated, so I think there has been, as far as I can tell, a good improvement on this. We would have also, in terms of usability, wished for a bit more cross-references in the documentation or the handbook, because that would make it easier for somebody, you know, to already find, okay, if I don't know about this particular topic, there's the link to the document relevant for this data page. Yes, the performance issues we mentioned and the usability of the web service, you know, we also said could be some improvements in terms of documentation, and so on. But these would be obviously large gains, but the quick wins would be the top two. So to give some examples, for the document management, you see the costs and the benefits errors. It means the lowest on the slide would be the sort of easiest to implement, and then the top one is sort of, you know, the sort of wish or the long-term aim maybe where we go. Unfortunately, we didn't really find anything where the errors point in opposite directions. So yes, the usability, it does always also incur an effort. But as I said, some things are easy to implement. So for example, for the documents, yes, I mean, the central document management system would be where everything is one place, from ENTSO-E and Acer and Java and everything. That would be perfect. But of course, we also know this is difficult, legal reasons. But for example, to at least have a document archive where you have basically a container and you find all the old documents ordered and see, okay, you can retrace what has happened. That would be very useful. And sort of in the middle, HTML-based document management systems are also actually very good in terms of trying to search, because a large number of PDFs, they are very difficult actually in terms of usability. And of course, for legally binding documents, consolidated versions. The example you see in brackets, the Austrian Energy Agency. So yes, there are Austrian or German examples, but of course, I'm sure many, many more exist. Gesetz im Internet, that's the legal official journal of Germany. The EU has one, many countries have them, and they are HTML based usually. For data provision, we'd have as a sort of basis the FAIR principles as a recommendation. They're used as a scientific standard for data. So data are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That's basically a guideline. So it's really more a quality control issue rather than a sort of having to redraw everything. And of course, as a sort of all one-stop shop, data shop, then if you're familiar, like Wandel, there you have dashboards and machine readable formats and everything available in various programming languages. And also very, very important actually, we find is knowledge transfer. I mentioned it at the beginning, things like flowcharts, visualizations, mentioned here grid map, for example, where you could visualize CNEs, flowcharts where you visualize processes. That can make things a lot easier in terms of trying, you know, convey information, and sometimes, you know, way easier than having long texts and a lot of documentation. Yeah, so that's a key sort of giveaway in a way to say visualization and knowledge transfer, concepts for knowledge transfer greatly improve sort of usability. And we also looked at KPIs, and I think this has been discussed today, and it's a KPI report, and I think that is really great. As I said, we did the study a while back, and I think what we found are that many of the KPIs we thought about back then, that's over 1.5 years ago, in a way, are now in the KPI report. So I think that's great and fantastic that this also has given so much room. The way we approached actually the KPIs though also was to say or think that this would be a dashboard in a way that is sort of updated daily, so not really a long report in a sort of PDF way, so really a sort of dashboard that has actually very few indicators. So, and what we thought very long and hard about was how to, because there are so many bidding zones now, of course, how to try and compress this information that it would be easier, good to look at for somebody who doesn't really have a lot of time to go through all the details. So, which are important, of course, but also how to create a dashboard that is sort of easy to use for those who don't have the resources to go through all the details. And we divided this in actually 3 areas. So one is the validation of flow-based market coupling. Again, we found this sort of important also from our surveys with market participants, because market trust in the sort of system is very essential. And ultimately, what we're sort of trying to achieve, for example, is price convergence. So if you have sort of one indicator that shows you, yes, you know, your system is delivering, or welfare is increased compared to isolated market zone, and you can see in one glance, basically, yes, it is sort of working how we're expecting it to work. And I see some of the price conversions for sure, and also some welfare analysis is in the KPI reports. One section we had dedicated to performance of Euphemia. So, for example, to see in terms of how welfare basically increases per iteration step, so that you know, you could be ensured that basically we are, you know, no longer improving welfare, that we are close to the optimal what we can find, or for example, computing time. And I know some of these indicators, at least, they're also reported, but we would also see this for a dashboard. You know, if you do it daily, then you could have that daily sort of trust and confidence. Yes, the algorithm is sort of doing what it is supposed to do. And then the third part would be the information for the market. And I think a lot of this reflected now, in a sense, it's more, again, a part of visualization and how to present this information. For example, the top limiting CBCOs, because it was the CWE, but not BCNEs, for example, or per bidding zone. And then, for example, we also had indicators on the bottom, accuracy of the base case, so to see how the base case basically ranks. So that's sort of a quick overview of a dashboard, but I think basically the main message here is that the way we envisage the KPIs is very much about also how to present information and try and get as much information as sort of one glance, and then maybe the details basically they are somewhere else, and then you can go and zoom in and say, oh, I really need to know about the CNEs, and then you sort of go somewhere else. But the dashboard is really a sort of overview and should give you that one glance and say, ah, yeah, I know what happened today. So to summarize, basically, you know, I think, again, let me emphasize that usability for, I think there is a sort of, whether it's 5 or 10 or 20%, but where in a way it doesn't really matter because you're the expert, you're very deep in the subject, you look at it, I mean, this is the one topic more or less you're dealing with, then the how doesn't really sort of matter as much, or it's maybe not as central, but really with usability, it is important to sort of broaden it, or the key is to broaden so that we can try and really have transparency, as I said, for a wide range of sort of market participants, organizations. And also let me make clear that, you know, nobody's suggesting that we should try and make it transparent for everybody, the wider public. So we're always talking about experts, experts who are dealing with this subject. Yeah, it's a summary, but I want to also allow maybe for some questions or comments. But we have our 3 pillars: document management, provision of data, and knowledge transfer. That is equally important, we think. And as I said, market transparency is essential for market trust, competition, and efficiency. And as I said, we have the 3 aspects: information, yes, it's there, but also usability and the sort of knowledge transfer and interaction. So I think that was it for my very quick run through of the study. It is available publicly, also English version, over 100 pages, so we didn't, but I hope I gave you a good overview, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. I think I will try and stop my, give back the screen sharing.
Okay, is there any question for Karina in the presentation?
I think I see one comment in the chat for the link to the study. We will post it for sure. It is available to the English version.
And there is a hand raised, I think.
Yes, this is Jérôme. So just a reaction for Karina. So thank you for this study. We'll be happy to read through it, but it looks quite promising and indeed interesting, not just to focus on what data is published, but how. And so this is maybe part of the work that we're too late acting on, maybe as market participants or experts. So very good that you highlight that. Yeah, then my question would rather be for the TSOs and more generally for the flow-based project, is how to take this kind of not only input but also advice by experts of publication of data as well, user friendliness, usability of data, in existing or future work on data transparency in the framework of flow-based.
Yeah, I could answer to that, Helen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we think that this is a very important topic indeed. The creating trust in the market is about getting the right information. Indeed, we should work on the how, but we also have to take in mind what we can achieve in a short and medium term, of course, because there's a lot of information around, and we need to make first steps, I think. And perhaps there we, as co-chairs, Helen, should try to figure out whether what kind of concept for organizing this dialogue between the market and the TSOs we could create to develop this.
Mm.
I don't think this is valuable, and it is also recognized. So not only the in-crowd should know, but a slightly wider part of the market should also know about the details. And there's also an education part of it. So yes, so we would propose to take this up as co-chairs, and then see whether we can organize some kind of process to develop this.
Yeah, exactly. I remember, Ruth, I think some years ago we set up this kind of discussion group together with the TSOs and market participants to elaborate the transparency framework that is currently in place in CWE. So I think we could imagine concrete solutions to reflect on this and to come with constructive and feasible
yes.
solutions.
Yeah.
Depending on I think the approach as Karina presented with quick wins and maybe some longer term solutions, but I think it's a good idea, and if there is this possibility to have workshops or solutions like before, I think it would be good to put that in place.
Okay.
So
let's take that as an action point then from this meeting. Yeah.
Okay. But I think the objective of the discussion today, at least on my side, was as a first step to check a bit whether there is this willingness on both sides to have constructive discussions on this. And of course, as said in the presentation, a lot has been done already. So the idea is not to redo everything and to rediscuss the contents, but rather focusing on the accessibility of data and see what kind of feasible solution can be done. So I take that as a yes.
Great. That's a really great answer from both of you.
Okay, great. I think we are right on schedule, and hence we should move to the next point of the agenda. I'm just taking it back. So the last point before the lunch break is the static grid model. We remember that some months ago, a survey was launched with questions regarding the static grid model. I think frequently market participants are asking questions on what is available, what is the last version of each static grid model, and so I think it was a good initiative to launch this survey, and I think Gert-Jan will now give us some feedback on that.
Yeah, indeed, thanks. You already did part of the introduction, so that I can keep my story shorter. But indeed, the static grid model, so it's indeed an obligation in the CCM. And it does provide indeed information on that it needs to be published, but not really the details. And I think also following the last core CG and some questions, the teasers they concluded that we really want to provide something meaningful. So it is helpful to do this consultation and ask the questions on what would be then meaningful for the market participants. So that is something that was indeed held. So responses from 8 parties, market parties, universities and consultancies. The requests were quite different. So there was quite a difference in what is asked or what is seen as additional value and meaningful. And it's really mainly focused on the forecasting aspect. Basically there were 2 basic directions. One is the CDB concept, which is already there, of course, and you can say time proven. But the downside is not really standard format for load flow software. But of course, the requests were then in direction to enhance this and to make improvements for this based on the lessons learned that we have. And the other one is more, you can say, we adopted the dynamic concept so that you really have something that you could use in load flow software. Also more details included. But what was concluded and also encountered when this assessment was done is that this not all data is owned by some TSOs, and it's also not really linked dynamic data linked to the nature of a static grid model. And there were, you can say, too many complications to simplify the data. So this has been assessed, but it's not something that was deemed as feasible. Yeah, mainly as a conclusion, especially the TSO's view is that, of course, it's our obligation as TSOs to provide the input to allow market participants to perform forecasting. So that's also the idea of the static grid model. But the forecasting itself, as I think also discussed earlier in this meeting, is really seen as a responsibility not of TSOs. So that is, yeah, you can say important to take into account in the main conclusions. But of course, based on also the input, yeah, we do saw clearly that there were some requests to enhance and improve what is now also used in CDBE. And the basic outline is mentioned on the next slide on what is now foreseen. Yeah, so it's really an extension and an improvement. So the frequency is something that would be done every 6 months. And the first publication would be 3 months before go live, because yeah, this is something that of course needs to be prepared. So there's also something mentioned on the scope. So lines, tie lines, transformers, remedial actions. Also for remedial actions, the names, the TSO, description, EIC codes. That was also often request that came back quite often to have this included. Format Excel, or yeah, so that's something that is similar to what is done in CDBE. And I think also the improvements compared to CDBE is that it will be published then centrally, so it will be centrally available, like of course on the JAR website. We have most information there. So in principle, it would be separate files per TSO, but yeah, maybe some concatenation if feasible. Also important that would be harmonized description of the naming convention, so that there's some consistency between also what is used in the publication, and also filtering that could be done on the TSO name. And I think that was also an explicit request or suggestion to also have a handbook for this, similar to the publication handbook, to have something available that describes what is available and how can you interpret this. So this is something that is then foreseen in a similar fashion.
Yeah, there is some hand raised from Olivier.
Yeah, one question, if you come back to the previous slide. The question would be, to what extent the information published in the static grid model would be consistent with what is used in the D2CF in the operational process for computing the flow-based domain. Mainly, I understand that lines, transformers, and Thailand will be published, but the experience we had for CWE is that it seems that only a subset of the lines, transformers, and substation was published, and that could lead to inconsistency between what is used in the D2CF and what is published. I think mainly what was missing was the availability of the lower voltage network, so 150 or 110 kV, which is part of the TSO network and or sometimes part of the DSO network, but modelized in the D2CF eventually. So yeah, I think in order for us to perform forecasts on those static grid models, we really need to have a good alignment between the lines that are modeled in the D2CF and the lines that are published in the static grid model. And yeah, the question is, what is this foreseen alignment?
Gertjan, I think you are on mute. We cannot hear you.
Yeah, so no, I understand the question indeed, and of course we now agreed on the principles and how to do this. It's not that we have all the static grid models and the same kind of information already available to say this will be the exact details, but indeed the idea is to make this consistent indeed. But yeah, it would be good to note this down as a follow-up to make this explicit and or confirm this. So let's do this as a follow-up. Yeah.
There may be a caveat when it comes to lines that are not owned by the TSOs.
But modeled in the D2CF.
Yeah, could be the case in some countries, and yeah, then it could be a problem to provide such information.
But we can check this and then maybe come back on like we did in the past on yeah, how this will be and for which parties it will be the case and which parties not.
Okay. And maybe another question. I think you pointed out in the previous slide. One thing that is mainly missing for using the static grid model is some kind of an idea of how the demand and the generation is spread across the different nodes of the network. And I understand that this can be a sensitive topic, given that can eventually provide some information about where big industrials are located or where power plants are located. Yeah, is there anything that is planned to somehow provide an information about how generation is located on the network and how demand is spread across the network? Because without this information, it's nearly impossible somehow to use the static grid model to perform load flow simulation. Load flow simulations need both the structure of the network, which is published in the static grid model, but it also needs injection and withdrawn and at the localized at the nodal level. Yeah, I think without that, it's very difficult to make any use of the static grid model. So it would be interesting to see how we could overcome that issue, or if it's still open, because yeah, again, I think it's very difficult to use them if this information is lacking.
And I think that, I mean, partly you already answered this yourself as well, of course, because you said something about probably or this will be difficult. And it's also mentioned as a con, of course, that there's not a standard format for load flow software. This, even if it's an improved version of CDB. So I think this is generally acknowledged. But to answer your question, if there are plans to provide this, not as far as I know that there are plans to provide this indeed. I mean, we're presenting here the scope of what, in line with the obligation to provide this, of course, in line with the survey that we performed, and in line with what is feasible to implement before go live, because that's, of course, also an important condition.
Maybe to formulate in another way the question, what is the point of publishing a static grid model if it's not to perform load flow calculation? Is it just to fulfill some legal requirement that is imposed by the capacity calculation methodology? But yeah, what can market parties do with impedance of lines or transformers, except trying to perform load flow computation? What is the point of publishing that?
I mean, for me, it's difficult to answer this personally, at least, because, yeah, as said, there's of course an obligation in the CCM, and it's something that was also developed in CDB. What we did try is we did ask, of course, input on what is expected. But as we also presented here, again, there are some limitations on what can be done, and where we can improve is more the centralization and the EIC codes, to better link the information to other things that have been published. But that's the thing that we can do now before go live and in line with the regulations.
Yeah, understood.
There is also a question in the chat from Jérôme. So when the TSO proposal following the survey, is there already a planning for implementation?
So you mean the implementation of the static grid model, right?
Hi.
Yeah, Jérôme,
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if I may just to on the next slide, please. So the different proposal you're making in the slides. When is the implementation date for those proposals?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's also mentioned as a second bullet with the frequency. So the first publication is foreseen 3 months before go live.
In terms of for the harmonization as well.
Yeah. So in line with
okay.
the proposals here described. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thanks a lot for the clarification.
There are still some hand raised. Sorry. Let me check. I cannot see. Yeah. Olivier, you still have a question?
No.
No? Okay, then there is a question from Eli.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I would like to say a few words on behalf on EDF R&D. So with a researcher point of view, and also as a user of this static grid model. Just to say quickly, yes, at EDF R&D we use this static grid model publication for 3 main purposes, I would say. First, to forecast the impact of network infrastructure developments on markets. To forecast the impact of transmission network availability, and third, to forecast the impact of regulation updates, for example, with this criteria of 70%. And concretely, in the past few years, we use this static grid model to build a model of the European electricity system, and including the transport network. And we do load flow simulations and also optimal power flow to trying to mimic what TSOs do. And I mean capacity calculation processes and market coupling processes for different scenarios and for different characteristic points of the year. And like Olivier said, we are often limited by a lack of data of this static grid model, and maybe there is an incomprehension of what a static grid model should be or could be. For us, it should not be just a network map or just impedance or reactance data. Of course, we need all the information about substations, line, transformers, VST, but we would also like to have all this data to completely and perfectly replay or mimic what a TSO do when he try to calculate capacity, exchange capacity. So yes, for us, three dimensions are missing. I would say first, like Olivier said, we would like to have a nodal distribution of generation and demand. Yes, but of course it's complicated, and it's complicated to share this data because it's sensitive. But also we would like to know all this information on information on the operational configuration that is used in different cases and scenarios that occur on the system. I mean, all these non-costly remedial action that are done by the TSO and all these topology changes. that's something which is not given in the static grid model. And also, we would like to have an harmonized format allowing an easy use in commercial power flow simulation softwares like Power Factory or PSSE. So I think it would be too long to go into details, but my last point is we consider that the grid model which are published with the TYNDP publications from ENTSO-E should become a reference for all grid publication. You said that effectively the format will be an Excel format. Yes, it's easy to read, but it's not really easy to handle it. And so a good format could be the CGMES format, because it offers a possibility to read all this information easily, and also it's easy to import all this data on this commercial software like Power Factory or PSSE. So yes, that was my point. So for us, for EDF research and development, we do studies to allow a better understanding of the open electric system, and more particularly about network issues. But we're not using this data in operational processes, because it's not possible, and maybe not something we need. So that was my point.
Thank you. But I think concretely, should we take this with Ruud and see how to respond to the suggestions you made, or Ruud, do you have any?
Maybe Hélène, because the survey, although there were not too many respondents, but I mean, it's clear what the market participants want. It was clearly described as well, but also here the answer has been provided, of course, on what can and cannot be done. And I think especially the format, but also then the information to be provided. It's also said not owned by some user. Actually, I think it's often owned by marketplace, of course. So if marketplace players themselves, their data may be available to all to each other, that's maybe you can help each other with the generation and at least the generation part. No, but. So I think the information is there. We know what the wish is for some parties at least, but also that we cannot facilitate this at this stage, and that we now have a concrete proposal on what we will do before go live.
Okay.
Okay.
But Elie, what I would suggest is, I don't know if you checked already in detail the answers and the feedback following the survey, but if you want, we can then see if there are remaining questions or remaining points to be discussed, and depending on that, bring that. I would discuss that with Ruud and see how to continue the discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Is it a good way forward?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Then it's time for lunch, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what we are a bit late, but we still have 50 minutes for the lunch break in order to start again at 1:45 as foreseen. So I would suggest to reconnect in 50 minutes. Okay. Have a good lunch.